Hi, my name is Frida Splendido and I am one of the coordinators for LAMiNATE, a research platform focusing on language acquisition, multilingualism and language teaching. In January of 2022, LAMiNATE held its first conference, a two-day event with research presentations on LAMiNATE-related topics. One of the keynotes at the conference was Luke Plonsky, who's an associate professor of applied linguistics at Northern Arizona University. His keynote had the title Consciously Optimistic on the state of quantitative methods in the applied language sciences. I had the opportunity to talk to Luke Plonsky and ask him a few questions about this field of research and where it's going in the future. This is that interview. Hello everyone and welcome to this video. We have a short interview today with Luke Plonsky. Thank you so much for being here today.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
And we have a few questions about what you do and what you think is the future in this field of research. So could you just start by telling us a little something about your research interests? What is it that you are interested in?
Yeah, I mostly think of myself as doing work in two different areas of applied linguistics. The first main area and sort of kind of where I come from and my background and training is in instructed second language acquisition. So I'm interested in how learners learn and particularly how that happens in instructional, institutional, classroom-based contexts. And so I've done some work in that area in the realm of vocabulary and classroom interaction, as well as a number of different individual difference and psychological variables. I kind of think of SLA, second language acquisition, as sort of like, we can think of like learner internal variables and constructs and mechanisms and learner external variables and mechanisms and constructs, and then also kind of linguistic processes. That's kind of how I think of it. I kind of live in those two major external or internal variables. But actually these days the main thrust behind my research and most of my activity is actually behind research methods. And so I care a whole lot about how we do the research that we do, not just the what, but the how. And so and the reason I care about that is not just because I'm a stats geek, which I am, and that's fine, but because I care about the what, because I care about developing better knowledge about our understanding of how languages are learned and taught and used and processed and assessed and all that. And so if we're going to get a good knowledge about that, we have to have high validity studies.
Wow. Yeah, true. And how you mentioned it in a little bit in passing. How did you get started? You mentioned your background, but what made you go into this field? And
oh yeah, sure. Good question. So I was a language teacher, like I think a lot of applied linguists at some point. We were studying language and then maybe we were teaching language. And for me, I was kind of at the same time when I started teaching language, I was teaching English and Spanish. And when I was starting to be a teacher, I had questions about how these things work and why we do things the way we do and testing things out in my classes. And at the same time, I was also starting to take a little bit of coursework on on teaching methods, and I found my way into a little bit of a couple classes on second language acquisition, and it really just kind of I kind of felt like the light bulb turned on, not in terms of my understanding, but the light bulb kind of curiosity, like, oh wow, I really want to. I just felt kind of excited by it and wanted to learn more, and as a way to at that time inform my own instruction as a teacher, but also maybe contribute to our broader understanding of language learning and teaching. That's sort of how I kind of get into the instructed SLA stuff. The methodological stuff for me kind of came via meta-analysis. I had a little bit of exposure to meta-analysis. This is back in the early 2000s. Lourdes Ortega was teaching at the university where I was doing a master's, which is actually where I am right now, Northern Arizona University, and she was teaching a PhD seminar on meta-analysis, and I wasn't taking it, but I knew some people were, and so I was sort of hearing things. And then later on, I did some formal training in that procedure, and that led me to kind of want to look across bodies of research to not only understand what kinds of findings they were yielding, but also to sort of dissect and pull apart in a really systematic way the research methods that were being applied in different domains of the field.
Ah, interesting. And so that's where you are right now, in a way, in the methods interest. What's something hands-on or tangible that you're working on right now? What's something that you could share with us?
Good question. Yeah, one of the projects I'm actually most interested and most excited about right now, I have a couple projects related to research ethics and but
Interesting.
ethics, yeah, but ethics through the lens of quantitative methods.
Mm.
Or you could say quantitative methods through the lens of ethics. And what we're sort of looking at is how, to me, the more I think about it, as somebody who cares a lot about research methods and this notion of study quality and what does that mean, and what is high validity, high quality research, what does that mean? To me, in a way, and at a really broad level, all of the decisions that we make in the context of carrying out a study, and that's also, by the way, sort of how I view all of the process of doing a project. To me is like a huge series of decisions. You're making decisions the whole way. And for me, all of those decisions, sometimes those decisions are arbitrary. Like I can decide to study Swedish as an L2 or to study Spanish as an L2, and there's nothing sort of better or worse about that decision. But a lot of the decisions that we make are actually associated with or do introduce potential threats to validity, or of higher quality or lower quality, or things like that. To me, a lot of the decisions we actually make are actually ethical decisions, or viewed maybe through a different framing. Our research is only ethical to the extent that it's of high quality. In other words, if we're not carrying out really high quality research, I think we're actually behaving unethically. If we think about the fact that we are using public resources, we are using our time, we are using oftentimes our participants' time. We are these introduce ethical issues all along the way. If we're not appropriately and accurately, to the best of our ability, informing our community of scholars, of linguists and folks in the language science community, then actually I think we're not acting ethically. And so I've been involved in a couple of projects just recently. One paper that's actually finished, just about to come out, and then a few other projects that are one is submitted, and then a couple others that are in progress right now, looking actually at the ethics of research methods in applied linguistics, and specifically quantitative research methods.
Interesting. Yeah, it really has. It's everywhere in the work that we do, these ethical questions and the consequences of what we do and how we do it. So I can see how that ties in with the methodological interest that you have. It
is all kind of meta. I mean, it's sort of all, it's meta research. It's not meta-analysis. It's meta research, and though it's sort of research on the way we do research. So that's also fits with that kind of broader agenda of mine.
Sure. Yeah. What would you say then the long-term goals of your research is? Big question, I know.
Yes, good to think about that. I want to keep us moving forward. We've seen, oh my gosh, we've seen so many exciting advances over the last 10 years or so, in terms of, there's been like this kind of almost like a methodological awakening, and I know that's where I live, so I'm biased. Like I mean, I'm like, that's what I'm thinking about. That's like, you know, what I'm thinking about all the time. But I have seen so many exciting things happening in the field over the last few years, and I'm so inspired by the next generation, and by generation I mean generations in academia are like every 5-10 years. You know, we produce academic offspring, you know, very quickly. But the next generations, I mean, the people are coming through graduate programs right now, and their methodological and statistical knowledge, it just blows me away. And so I'm really excited to see that. I'm not talking, just to be clear, I'm not talking about us moving towards sophistication and necessarily. I'm not interested in that even. Our methods need to serve our research questions. It can't be the other way around. But I'm super excited about the way I see the field really developing towards people identifying as being methodologists, of having methodological expertise. You know, that hasn't historically been the case, compared to, you know, our colleagues in disciplines like education and psychology, where you can get a degree in research, in educational research methodology. You can get a PhD in that. They have many journals. There are people that identify as methodologists. We don't really have that tradition, but I think I see us moving that way. And even like sort of in the way, even the ways that we talk about ourselves, like I love to see people even like identify as, these are my substantive interests, these are my methodological interests.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of good for us as scholars. I think it's good for the field. It's good for our training and the way that we think about the types of knowledge that we need to develop. So that's one direction I kind of would like to kind of see the field maybe hopefully heading in, and certainly for me too. I see myself continuing down this line of kind of two parallel agendas in the world of instructed second language acquisition, and then also in the world of trying to advance methodology in our field. I don't think that we're still such a young discipline. We still have a long way to go in terms of establishing, in terms of interesting methodological research questions to ask. So yeah, I guess that's it.
Yeah. So let's stay in that kind of area of where is this going and what are we doing, and the multiple fields. Well, from your perspective, the field of SLA research, what would you say are the most central research questions for the next 10, 15 years? If you had to choose.
Yeah, oh my gosh. It's such a broad field. I mean, I guess everything is. We need to figure out. I think we need to figure out some kind of. We need to come to not to agreement, because I think that the proliferation of theories and approaches is great and healthy, especially in a young discipline like ours. But I'd like to see us come to a little bit more consensus and start building a little more theory and a little more cohesion. That's not a research question. I know I'm not really answering your question, but
still something looking ahead. So I mean,
yeah. That's it. Yeah, that's sort of. I think to me that the problem is there's a siloing and people not being able to speak to each other. And I'm not saying that we're going to come up with in the next 20 or 30 years some kind of unified theory of language development. But I'd like to see us maybe move towards something like that. Mm-hmm. And so whatever, and that involves lots and lots of different research questions. But right now the research questions seem to be like we're building little towers, but that the towers aren't connected enough. So I'd like to see us move in that direction. Yeah,
finding a way to find the connections between these towers that we're trying to construct as well as we can. So yeah.
That's like a big challenge. It's not a research question, but like a challenge I see facing, and I'd like to see us move towards addressing that challenge.
I mean, it's a question of how things actually do interact. That is a question. Are these two theories actually, are they doing the same thing but using different words? Or is it
right?
Yeah. So if we look back for a second, what would you say is your most significant finding this far?
Oh man, it's hard. I don't want to sound like, well, this is so important. You know,
well,
this
I
thing
asked
that
the horrible questions, you know.
No. It's a reasonable question. To me, the findings that I feel like that I hope have made some kind of contribution are the findings that provide empirical evidence of the extent to which we're not doing sometimes the things that we should be doing. And so like things like reporting practices, features of design, inadequate analyses, and a lot of my research has tried to point out empirically and not like a critical way. It's I mean critical, but not like in a pointing fingers way. I'm not trying to be judgmental. Way? What's that?
Critical examining way?
Yeah, critical examining, and hopefully a constructive way. Like, hey guys, things are not well. We are not okay. It's sort of like this kind of like taking stock of who we are and what we're doing methodologically. I'd say that's one of the and I've been involved in a bunch of studies that have tried to do that in a systematic way. It's not like I'm like just writing a position paper saying, hey guys, I think our sample sizes are too small, or we're using too many t-tests, we should be using regression or mixed effects modeling or whatever. That's not what I'm saying. Sort of at the global level, we have evidence of this, of these really, really major flaws in our research that pose serious threats to to everything that we think we know. And so I hope that has made some kind of contribution. And the other thing I would say that I hope has made some kind of contribution so far is to help move us towards a clear understanding of how to interpret magnitude of effects as expressed in different types of effect size indices. And so we historically in quantitative research have taken a really binary sort of mindset towards our outcomes, which is flawed and very limited and arbitrary in a way. I mean, like, to boil down an entire study, which might take years of your life, to a simple yes/no outcome is self-defeating and horribly inefficient, and actually, I would argue, unethical. I think it's inappropriate and unethical to interpret your results when you have a continuous outcome as binary. Yes, there's an effect, no, there's not an effect. That's not the way the world works. That we don't live in a world of zeros and ones. We have continuous distributions of data, and we distill them into flawed zeros and ones. And so I've tried to help move us through a clear, hopefully a better, more field-specific and empirically informed understanding of interpreting effect sizes, which give us a richer understanding of the relationships or the effects that we care about. So that's another thing I've tried to contribute to.
Yeah. Final question. What do you find exciting about the research that you do? We've kind of been touching a bit on that, and you mentioned the being a statistics nerd and all of that, but what would you say is it that you find exciting about your research when you get to work in the morning and you're like, yes?
Yeah. Totally. I love it. I love coming up with ways of advancing and integrating. I'll mention a couple things, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I love
definitely.
coming up with ways of integrating and advancing the methods that we use in our field. So one way to do that is I try to read, I wouldn't say widely, but I try to read regularly in other disciplines to find out what kinds of techniques they're using that we haven't yet introduced in applied linguistics, and to introduce them. I love doing that, introducing new things. I love coming up with ways of helping or trying to encourage our field to improve the practices that we already have, which I think are good. I absolutely love working with junior scholars and students, graduate students, undergraduate students, and helping get them excited and try to navigate, excited about doing good research and also navigate some of this world that we live in. And then fourth, I am super excited about actually, and this is sort of separate from my research agenda, which is why I haven't mentioned it yet, but about, I know this maybe sounds nerdy also, but guess what?
The right forum for nerdiness.
That's right. We're in a good company. Yeah. Professional development. I love that stuff. And actually, my last book was on professional development, and it's not part of my research agenda per se, but it's like all these things that are kind of hidden, that you hopefully learn from your advisor, or you just like sort of expected to pick up. It's almost like we have in our graduate programs like this parallel curriculum where like here's the real curriculum, and then here's all the things that like we don't teach you, but like we expect you to know, like applying for jobs and writing a CV and presenting at conferences and etiquette and interviewing and getting grants, and like we don't really talk about these things enough. And so I love to sort of try to bring those things to light and help take away some of the mystery around them, to give us more confidence to be successful professionals in the field. So those are the things that I'm most excited about.
Great. Thank you so much. That was an excellent list to finish on today. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.